Iran deploys new weapon to sink U.S. ships, F-35s on the move. Picture this. It is February 3rd, 2026. Somewhere over the dark Arabian Sea, roughly 500 miles from the southern coast of Iran, an American aircraft carrier cuts silently through the water. The USS Abraham Lincoln, one of the most powerful warships ever built, is surrounded by a ring of destroyers, their radar systems spinning constantly, scanning every inch of sky. On the flight deck, pilots are on standby. Below decks, weapon systems are armed and ready. The tension aboard that ship is unlike anything most of those sailors have ever felt in their careers. And then, a blip appears on radar. Something is coming. Something Iranian. Something armed. And within seconds, a decision has to be made that could either prevent a war or start one. That moment actually happened, and the world barely noticed. While the headlines were focused on trade deals and political drama, something enormous and deeply alarming was unfolding in one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet. Iran was not just rattling sabers. Iran was moving weapons. New weapons. Weapons specifically designed and purpose-built to do one thing: find and destroy American warships. At the same time, the United States was quietly but urgently repositioning some of its most lethal aircraft in the world, the F-35 Lightning II, across the Atlantic, through Europe, and toward the Persian Gulf. The pieces of a potential confrontation between the world's most powerful military and one of the most asymmetrically dangerous regional forces on Earth were being moved into position in real time. This is not speculation. This is not a hypothetical war game. Every single development you're about to hear is documented, sourced, and verified. And when you understand the full picture of what has been happening in those waters over the last several weeks, you will understand why military analysts, naval experts, and intelligence officers around the world are watching this situation with more anxiety than they have felt in years. Because what Iran has deployed and what America is deploying in response tells you everything about where this crisis is headed. Let us go back to the beginning, not to February 2026, but to a moment several months earlier that changed everything. June 22nd, 2025. 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew a staggering 37-hour non-stop mission to Iran. Their payload consisted of 14 massive GBU-57A B bombs, each one weighing 30,000 pounds, each one a bunker-busting weapon of extraordinary destructive power. Those bombs were dropped on 3 of Iran's most critical nuclear facilities: the underground enrichment plant at Fordo, the sprawling complex at Natanz, and the research center at Isfahan. The operation was called Midnight Hammer. It was the most significant American strike on Iranian soil since the targeted killing of General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. And it did not happen in isolation. What most people did not know at the time, and what the Air Force only confirmed months later, was that flying ahead of those B-2 bombers were American F-35A Lightning II fighters from the 388th Fighter Wing, based out of Hill Air Force Base in Utah. These jets were the first aircraft to enter Iranian airspace. Not the bombers, the F-35s. Their mission was to go in first, suppress Iran's surface-to-air missile systems, and clear a path so that the B-2s could complete their strikes without being shot down. They were the tip of the spear. They went in first, and they came out last. The Air Force described them as having paved the way for the entire operation. And the fact that Iran, despite having what it claimed were advanced air defenses, was completely unable to stop a single one of those aircraft from completing their mission, told the world something very important about the gap in capability between what Tehran claims and what it can actually deliver. But here's the thing about Iran, and this is something that every defense analyst who has studied this country understands at a fundamental level. Iran does not respond to embarrassment by backing down. It responds by going back to the drawing board, studying what went wrong, and coming back with something new. And that is exactly what happened. In the months that followed Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran did not retreat into silence. It accelerated, it pushed harder, it invested faster. And by January of 2026, the results of that acceleration were starting to become visible in ways that alarmed military planners across the Western world. On January 29, 2026, in a ceremony that was broadcast on Iranian state television, something remarkable happened. Major General Amir Hatami, the commander-in-chief of the Iranian army, presided over the formal induction of 1,000 new unmanned aerial vehicles into Iran's combat forces. Not 100, not 200, 1,000. These were not the low-grade consumer drones that get modified in garages for battlefield use. These were military-grade unmanned systems built by Iran's defense industry, specifically to address the threats that Iran experienced in its June 2025 confrontation with the United States and Israel. General Hatami was explicit about why this was happening. He said, and this is a direct quote from state media, that in accordance with the threats we are facing, maintaining and enhancing strategic advantages for rapid combat and a crushing response to any invasion is always on the Army's agenda. Think about what that means. Iran looked at what happened during Operation Midnight Hammer. It looked at the 12-day war with Israel that preceded it. It studied every engagement, every failure, every weakness that was exposed, and it came back with 1,000 new pieces of hardware designed to plug those gaps. These new drones were built across 4 categories: strike drones capable of attacking fixed and moving targets, reconnaissance drones capable of persistent surveillance over extended areas, electronic warfare drones designed to degrade and disrupt enemy sensor systems and communications, and here's the part that should send a chill through every naval officer in the United States Navy: sea-capable drones. Drones designed not just to fly from land bases, but to take off from and land on water. Drones with operational ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers. Drones with stealth characteristics to reduce their radar signature. Drones purpose-built for hunting ships. Iran's defense minister, Brigadier General Aziz Nasserzadeh, spelled it out without any ambiguity. These systems were designed according to new threats and the experiences of the 12-day war. They were built to destroy specific fixed and moving targets at sea, in the air, and on land. When an Iranian defense minister specifically names naval targets in a public announcement about new weapons, the United States Navy listens. But the drone deployment was only one piece of what Iran was building. Because the drone that got shot down on February 3rd, the one that brought the world to the edge of its seat over the Arabian Sea, was not even the most dangerous weapon in Iran's expanding naval arsenal. To understand what Iran is really capable of, and why the presence of the USS Abraham Lincoln in those waters is so consequential, you need to understand the full picture of what Tehran has been assembling over the past several years. Start with the missiles. Iran possesses what the Center for Strategic and International Studies has described as the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the entire Middle East, with thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles ranging from short range to several hundred kilometers. But within that arsenal, there is a specific category of weapons that keeps American naval commanders awake at night: the anti-ship missiles. The Noor missile is one of the most concerning. It is an Iranian-built reverse-engineered variant of the Chinese-made C-802 anti-ship missile. It has a range of approximately 136 miles, and in its terminal phase, the final seconds before impact, it accelerates to Mach 1.4, which is 1.4 times the speed of sound. It deploys a millimeter-wave active radar seeker in those final moments to locate its target and guide itself to impact. Analysts believe it is extremely difficult to jam. A hit from this weapon on a surface combatant would not be a minor event. Then there is the Talayeh. Iran announced this missile in late 2023 and claimed capabilities that, if accurate, represent a genuine leap forward. Iranian state media reported that the Talayeh is a long-range cruise missile with a reported range of over 600 miles. But what makes it particularly unsettling is not just its range. It is the claimed ability to switch targets and adjust its course during flight. In other words, a smart missile that can change its mind. Whether all of Iran's performance claims about this weapon are fully accurate is debated by Western analysts, because Iran has a documented history of exaggerating its weapons capabilities, but the direction of development is unmistakable. Iran is building smarter, longer-range anti-ship weapons. Then there are the ballistic anti-ship missiles, the Khalij Fars and the Zolfaghar Basir. These represent a fundamentally different threat category. They use terminal guidance systems, either radar or electro-optical seekers, to home in on their targets in the final phase of flight. They travel at multiple times the speed of sound on their way down. A direct hit from a weapon like this, carrying a large ballistic warhead traveling at that velocity, could cause catastrophic structural damage to a surface vessel. The kinetic energy alone, before you even factor in the explosive warhead, is enormous. The challenge of intercepting a ballistic missile in its terminal phase, when it is screaming down at hypersonic velocity from high altitude, is one of the most technically difficult problems in modern naval warfare. And beyond the missiles, Iran has been doing something far more creative with its naval forces, something that represents a genuine doctrinal innovation that Western military planners were not fully anticipating. In early February of 2025, almost exactly a year before the confrontation over the Arabian Sea, Iran commissioned its first drone carrier. They called it the Iris Shahid Bagheri. And make no mistake about what this vessel represents. On the surface, the Shahid Bagheri does not look like much. It was originally a commercial container ship called the Peregrine. It is 787 feet long, and the Iranians modified it by installing a runway of approximately 570 feet, making it capable of launching and recovering drones of various sizes. It can deploy Shahed loitering munitions, the same family of kamikaze drones that Iran's proxy, the Houthi movement, used to wreak havoc on commercial shipping and American naval assets in the Red Sea. It can launch Ababil 3 and Ababil 5 multi-role drones capable of reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and strike missions. It carries the Mohajer 6, which has a line-of-sight control range of 120 miles, carries guided munitions, and has been described as Iran's most capable operational UAV. and it can theoretically deploy unmanned surface vehicles and unmanned underwater vehicles as well. Think about the strategic logic behind this vessel. The Houthis, Iran's proxy force in Yemen, used relatively crude drone technology launched from land bases to conduct over 140 attacks on commercial and military shipping in the Red Sea. They disrupted global trade routes, forced insurance premiums through the roof, diverted enormous amounts of U.S. naval resources, and demonstrated that even a non-state actor with limited resources could challenge the world's most powerful navy in a maritime environment using cheap, expendable unmanned systems. Iran watched that campaign and realized something important. If you can do that from land, imagine what you can do from a mobile platform that can reposition anywhere in the Gulf, the Arabian Sea, or beyond. The Shahid Bagheri is Iran taking the Houthi playbook and scaling it up. It is the IRGC applying the lessons of Yemen at a force multiplication level. The Hudson Institute's Defense Intelligence team specifically noted that Iran took the combat experience its IRGC gained from the Houthis drone and missile operations against U.S. Navy assets and implemented it at a larger scale. This vessel gives Iran a floating drone base that can be positioned far closer to its targets than any land-based facility. And speaking of positioning, on January 29, 2026, the same day Iran was inducting its 1,000 new drones, the IRGC announced something else. Its naval units would be conducting live ammunition exercises in the Strait of Hormuz over 2 consecutive days, issuing navigational warnings to commercial shipping transiting the area. Let that sink in for a moment. The Strait of Hormuz is arguably the single most important maritime choke point in the entire world. Nearly 20% of all seaborne oil and liquefied natural gas shipments pass through this narrow passage. The usable shipping channels through the strait are only about 2 miles wide in each direction. 2 miles. In those confined waters, small, fast, heavily armed Iranian patrol craft can appear from nowhere. Mines can be laid in hours. And 25 Iranian submarines, including the so-called black hole vessels that are extraordinarily quiet and difficult to detect when operating near the seabed, can disappear into the geography of the Gulf and wait. Those submarines deserve more attention than they typically receive in mainstream coverage. The Strait of Hormuz's geography is an enormous tactical advantage for Iran in this respect. The water is shallow, the bottom is littered with geological features, and wrecks that make sonar returns noisy and unreliable. Temperature layers in the water interfere with acoustic detection. The constant commercial traffic through the strait creates a deafening background of engine noise and propeller cavitation that masks the submarine's acoustic signature. In this environment, a small, quiet, diesel-electric submarine running on batteries, producing almost no acoustic signature at all, can be nearly invisible to even the most advanced anti-submarine warfare systems the U.S. Navy possesses. They are not a threat that can simply be wished away or dismissed. They are a real and serious concern for every surface vessel operating in those waters. The IRGC also maintains over 130 patrol and coastal combatant vessels, many of them fast attack craft armed with anti-ship missiles. Their doctrine is built around swarming, sending dozens of small, fast, hard-to-hit boats at a larger vessel simultaneously from multiple directions, overwhelming the target's close-in defenses through sheer numbers and speed. Iran practiced this doctrine extensively in military exercises and demonstrated it in harassment operations against American ships in the Gulf over the past decade. In the confined waters of the Strait of Hormuz, where a larger warship cannot maneuver freely, this swarm tactic becomes genuinely dangerous. You cannot outrun 30 boats coming at you from 10 different directions at the same time. The announcement of those live-fire exercises was not made in a vacuum. It came 2 days after the United States announced its own military drills in the region. It came as the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group was sailing directly toward Iranian waters. It was a message delivered in the form of naval artillery rounds fired into the sea. It was Tehran saying, "We are here, we are ready, and we are watching." It is worth pausing here to understand why Iran fights the way it fights. Because understanding the logic behind Iran's asymmetric naval strategy is essential to understanding why the weapons it has deployed are genuinely threatening even to the most powerful navy in the world. Iran's conventional military is vastly outmatched by the United States in nearly every traditional metric. Its air force is ancient and barely functional. Its navy cannot match the United States surface for surface. Its land army, while large, is not equipped or trained to fight the kind of high-intensity combined arms warfare that the United States Army and Marine Corps can bring to bear. Iran knows this. Its military planners are not delusional. They have studied American military history carefully and drawn conclusions from it. What they concluded is this: you do not fight America by trying to beat America at its own game. You fight America by making the price of fighting you too high to pay. That is the entire foundation of Iran's military doctrine. You make every asset America sends into your region, every ship, every aircraft, every soldier, a potential casualty that has to be defended against 100 different threats simultaneously. You fill the battle space with cheap, expendable, but potentially lethal systems. You use the geography of the Gulf to negate the advantages of superior technology. You threaten the global economy through the Strait of Hormuz to make the political cost of any military action against you enormous, even if the military outcome favors the United States. You keep the opposition guessing about what you have and where it is, because uncertainty is itself a form of deterrence. And crucially, you remind the Americans at every opportunity that you can absorb a military defeat and still be standing at the end of it, because you have absorbed military strikes before and you are still here. That is not recklessness. That is a calculated strategy. A deeply dangerous one, but a calculated one. Now let us talk about that carrier strike group. Because the arrival of the Abraham Lincoln in the U.S. Central Command Area of Responsibility on January 26, 2026, was the triggering event for almost everything that followed. This was not a routine deployment that happened to end up in the Middle East. The carrier and its strike group were specifically redirected from the Indo-Pacific, from operations in the Pacific Ocean, and sent to the Persian Gulf region on direct orders as part of what President Donald Trump publicly described as a massive armada moving toward Iran. The White House called it a precautionary measure. The Pentagon said it was necessary to protect American troops and interests in the region, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio specifically citing 30 to 40,000 American military personnel stationed across 8 or 9 facilities throughout the Middle East. The Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz-class supercarrier. It is over 1,000 feet long and displaces over 100,000 tons fully loaded. Its flight deck is home to Carrier Air Wing 9, which consists of 8 squadrons flying a formidable collection of aircraft: F-35C Lightning II, stealth fighters, FA-18E-F Super Hornet strike fighters, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets, E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft, and multiple helicopter squadrons. The carrier travels with 3 guided missile destroyers: the USS Delbert D. Black, the USS McFall, and the USS Mitcher, each equipped with the Aegis combat system and a magazine full of standard missiles designed to intercept ballistic and hypersonic threats hundreds of kilometers away. The strike group represents one of the most formidable concentrations of conventional military firepower in the world, and it was sailing straight into Iran's declared strategic backyard. On February 3, 2026, the confrontation that the world had been dreading arrived, not in the catastrophic form of missiles and explosions, but in a form that was quiet, professional, and yet deeply alarming in what it signaled. An Iranian Shahed 139 drone was detected approaching the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. The Shahed 139 is a long-range loitering munition, a kamikaze drone, capable of carrying over 100 pounds of explosives. Russia used the same family of drones extensively in its attacks deep inside Ukrainian territory, striking power plants, apartment buildings, and critical infrastructure hundreds of kilometers from the front lines. Now, one of them was heading toward a nuclear-powered American aircraft carrier. A Marine F-35C from Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 314, known as the Black Knights, the Marine Corps' first operational F-35C squadron, intercepted the drone and shot it down. The engagement was clean and professional. No American personnel were hurt. The threat was neutralized. CENTCOM spokesman Captain Tim Hawkins confirmed the engagement publicly, stating that an F-35C fighter jet from Abraham Lincoln shot down the Iranian drone in self-defense. But here is what makes that event so significant, and it is something that got lost in the brief media coverage that followed. That was not the only incident that day. Within hours of the drone intercept in the Strait of Hormuz, 2 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps patrol boats and a Mohair drone approached the U.S.-flagged commercial tanker MV Stena Imperative at high speed. According to CENTCOM, the Iranian forces threatened to board and seize the tanker during its transit through the strait. The destroyer USS McFall responded immediately, intercepting the Iranian vessels and escorting the tanker safely through with support from U.S. Air Force aircraft overhead. The tanker continued on its way. But the message that Iran was sending that day was unmistakable. On the same day, in 2 different engagements, Iranian forces tested America's response to 2 different threats: an aerial attack on the carrier and a surface seizure of a commercial vessel. They were probing, they were testing, they were seeing exactly how far they could push and exactly how fast the Americans would push back. CENTCOM responded to both incidents with language that was unusually blunt for official military communications. Continued Iranian harassment and threats in international waters and airspace will not be tolerated. The command had already issued a formal warning to Iran the previous week, spelling out in precise detail exactly which behaviors it would not accept: unsafe overflight of U.S. military vessels engaged in flight operations, high-speed boat approaches on a collision course with American warships, and weapons trained at U.S. forces. Iran received that warning, and then, days later, it sent that drone anyway. Now comes the part of this story that should make every viewer understand why the title of this piece is not just a dramatic headline. It is an operational reality, because while all of this was unfolding in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, something extraordinary was happening on the other side of the world. At Burlington Air National Guard Base in Vermont, 6 F-35A Lightning II fighters from the Vermont Air National Guard's 158th Fighter Wing were being prepared for deployment. On February 9th, 2026, using the call signs Tabor 41 through Tabor 46, those 6 jets took off, accompanied by 3 KC-135 Stratotanker refueling aircraft from Bangor Air National Guard Base in Maine. They crossed the Atlantic Ocean and landed at RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, one of the primary stepping stone bases for American air power moving into the Middle East. This was not the first movement. Those 6 jets joined 6 other F-35s from the same Vermont unit that had already crossed the Atlantic weeks earlier, stopping in the Azores before moving to Spain. In total, the 158th Fighter Wing, the Vermont Air National Guard, was repositioning its entire complement of F-35As toward the Middle East. Flight tracking data, publicly available, air traffic control communications, and open-source intelligence analysts who track military aircraft movements confirmed every detail. The War Zone, one of the most authoritative defense publications in the world, reported the movements extensively. The Aviationist, another highly respected defense media outlet, independently verified the same tracking data. Why does the Vermont Air National Guard matter specifically? Because this is not just any F-35 unit. This is the unit that served a critical role in the most complex American air combat operation in recent history. During Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, it was F-35As from the 388th Fighter Wing and 419th Fighter Wing, the parent units of this type of C-80 mission, that flew ahead of the B-2 bombers into Iranian airspace. Their mission was suppression of enemy air defenses, CAD. They were the aircraft that went into the most heavily defended airspace in the Middle East, found Iran's surface-to-air missile radars, activated their sophisticated electronic warfare systems, and either jammed, destroyed, or suppressed those systems so that the B-2s could complete their bombing runs unmolested. They are specialists in exactly the kind of mission that would be required if the United States were to conduct another strike on Iran. And they were now moving toward the Middle East again. Air and Space Forces magazine, which has direct access to official Air Force sources, confirmed the movements and noted that the F-35s would give the United States additional capability to strike targets deep inside Iran. The War Zone specifically reported that these aircraft played a key suppression of enemy air defense role during Midnight Hammer, paving the way for the B-2 bombers. And they added something else that is important context for everything happening right now. Also being repositioned at the same time were EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets from Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia. The Growlers are the Navy's dedicated electronic warfare aircraft, platforms that can blind enemy radar systems, jam communications networks, and support both manned aircraft and standoff munitions, penetrating into heavily defended territory. The War Zone reported that Growlers in the Middle East would be critical force multipliers and could be indicative of what one would see in the lead-up to a kinetic operation centered heavily on strikes on targets in inland areas. Search and rescue assets were also being repositioned. HC-130J, a Combat King aircraft specifically designed for the recovery of downed pilots, were tracked moving to Al Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. These aircraft are not deployed for routine training. They are deployed when there is a realistic possibility that aircrew may go down over hostile territory and need to be extracted under fire. Their presence in Jordan is a data point that military analysts read as a strong operational signal. You do not pre-position search and rescue aircraft unless you are genuinely preparing for a scenario in which you might need them. By the time all of this movement was accounted for, the full picture of American air power in the Middle East as of early February 2026 was staggering. 3 full squadrons of F-15E Strike Eagles, 1 squadron of F-16 Fighting Falcons, 1 squadron of A-10 Thunderbolt II close air support aircraft, the freshly arrived F-35As from Vermont, the F-35Cs aboard the Abraham Lincoln, multiple EA-18G Growlers, additional terminal high-altitude area defense systems, the THAAD, repositioned to provide ballistic missile defense coverage, Patriot missile defense batteries appearing at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, captured in satellite imagery, 3 separate Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers operating in the region, independently from the carrier strike group, 3 littoral combat ships based out of Bahrain positioned for mine-sweeping duties if Iran chose to deploy mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and a guided missile submarine, type and location classified, somewhere beneath the surface of those waters. This is what a superpower looks like when it is genuinely preparing for the possibility of major combat operations. Now, the question that every viewer is probably asking right now is this: can Iran actually do it? Can Iran actually sink a United States Navy aircraft carrier? It is the question that defense analysts have been wrestling with for years, and the honest answer, the one that is accurate rather than comfortable, is more complicated and more unsettling than most people want to hear. Start with the limitations. Western analysts are near unanimous in concluding that sinking a Nimitz-class supercarrier outright would be extraordinarily difficult for Iran given current capabilities. The Abraham Lincoln does not travel alone. It sits behind a protective screen of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each carrying the Aegis combat system, the most advanced integrated naval air defense platform in the world. This system creates a protective bubble extending hundreds of kilometers in every direction, capable of tracking and engaging dozens of incoming threats simultaneously. The first line of defense is the SM-3 interceptor, designed to hit ballistic missile threats while they are still in space, literally in the vacuum above the atmosphere, before they accelerate into their terminal dive. For threats that penetrate that outer layer, the SM-6 provides engagement within the atmosphere, with advanced software capable of tracking and destroying high-speed threats in the final seconds before impact. For threats that manage to get even closer, the carrier itself carries the AN-SLQ-32 electronic warfare system, which can beam high-power electromagnetic energy at incoming missiles, confusing their radar seekers or blinding their sensors and causing them to lose lock. And for anything that gets through all of that, the absolute last line of defense, there is the Phalanx close-in weapon system, a radar-guided rotating cannon that fires 20mm tungsten rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute, creating a wall of metal in the path of any incoming weapon in the final moments before impact. The carrier itself is a structure of almost incomprehensible physical resilience. It is over 1,000 feet long, built with watertight compartments, multiple redundant systems, and enough structural mass that even significant damage would not necessarily put it on the bottom of the sea. Most defense experts agree on this. Completely sinking a U.S. supercarrier is not just difficult. It approaches the realm of the operationally implausible under most realistic scenarios. But here is where the analysis gets uncomfortable. Because completely sinking a carrier is not actually the goal that Iran needs to achieve to fundamentally alter the strategic equation in a conflict. The far more realistic and strategically meaningful objective is what defense analysts call a mission kill. A mission kill means that a single successful strike on the flight deck, hitting the aircraft catapults, the landing arresting cables, or the runway surface itself, would ground the entire air wing. Every F-35C, every Super Hornet, every Growler aboard that ship would be unable to fly. The carrier would still be floating. The crew would still be alive. But as an offensive combat platform projecting power over a 500-mile radius, it would be neutralized. It would have to withdraw. And in a conflict scenario, losing that air power could be the decisive factor. Iran's strategy for achieving that mission kill relies not on a single perfect weapon, but on saturation. The idea is to launch simultaneous waves of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles in numbers that overwhelm the defensive systems aboard the carrier and its escorts. Interceptors are not unlimited. Missiles have magazines that run dry. The SM-3 and SM-6 batteries aboard the destroyers hold a finite number of rounds, and reload at sea is a slow, complex process. If Iran can generate enough simultaneous threats, enough objects in the air at the same time, it creates situations where the defensive systems have to make impossible allocation decisions. You cannot intercept everything if there are more incoming threats than you have interceptors. And Iran's 1,000 new drones, combined with its anti-ship missile arsenal, are specifically designed to create that exact situation. The critical question, the one that separates Iran's claims from Iran's actual demonstrated capability, is whether Tehran can execute what military analysts call the kill chain. To hit a moving aircraft carrier at sea with a ballistic or cruise missile, you cannot just point the weapon in the general direction of the ship and fire. You need persistent, reliable intelligence about exactly where the carrier is at every moment, because carriers move. The Abraham Lincoln travels at speeds over 30 knots and changes course constantly in unpredictable patterns. You need continuous satellite or drone surveillance to track that movement in real time. You need secure, reliable data links that can transmit that targeting information to your missiles fast enough for it to remain accurate. You need mid-course missile updates so the weapon can adjust its flight path as the target moves. And you need a highly accurate terminal guidance system that can distinguish a specific ship from the ocean background in the final seconds of flight, from extreme altitude, at hypersonic velocity. Iran has made investments in each link of that chain. It has indigenous surveillance satellites, though their capability falls well short of American or Israeli systems. It has the over-the-horizon Nazir radar system, unveiled in recent years, which Iran claims can track naval targets at enormous distances beyond the line of sight. It has the sea-capable drones included in its latest delivery of 1,000 UAVs, which could in theory serve as persistent reconnaissance platforms over contested maritime areas, providing targeting data to ground-launched or ship-launched missiles. And critically, Iran has the IRGC Navy's Shahid Bagheri drone carrier, which could theoretically be positioned to maintain surveillance on a carrier strike group from much closer range than any land-based system could achieve. The pieces of the kill chain exist in Iranian hands, in isolation. What has never been demonstrated is whether Iran can string them all together in real combat conditions under electronic attack from American jamming systems that would be working specifically to break every one of those links the moment hostilities began. During the June 2025 confrontation with Israel, Iran launched large salvos of ballistic and cruise missiles. Many of them were intercepted. Many of them missed. The performance gap between what Iran claimed its weapons could do and what they actually did in real combat conditions was significant. Western analysts who reviewed the results concluded that Iran had yet to demonstrate the full integration of a combat-effective kill chain against a moving naval target in real operational conditions. That gap between advertised capability and demonstrated reality is reassuring, but it is not a reason to be complacent, because Iran is learning. That is the whole point of inducting those 1,000 new drones. That is why the Shahid Bagheri drone carrier exists. That is why Iran spent 2025 studying every engagement it was involved in and rebuilding its forces with those lessons incorporated. Iran knows what went wrong, and Iranian engineers are working right now to fix it. The question is not whether Iran has the capability to sink an American carrier today. The question is how close that capability is to becoming real, and whether the current crisis will give Iran the opportunity to test it before it is complete. There is something else happening in this story that most coverage has missed entirely, and it involves Russia. Satellite imagery analyzed by multiple defense intelligence firms in late 2025 revealed construction activity at Iran's Hamadan Air Base that was specifically sized and structured to accommodate a new, much larger, and more capable aircraft than anything currently in Iran's inventory. The construction timelines at Hamadan aligned precisely with confirmed production milestones at Russia's Komsomolsk-on-Amur aircraft plant. What Russia was building there and delivering to Iran under a deal for up to 48 aircraft was the Sukhoi Su-35, one of the most capable fourth-generation plus fighter jets in the world. Iran's current Air Force flies American aircraft purchased before the 1979 revolution, many of which barely function due to decades of sanctions and spare parts shortages. The F-4 Phantoms, F-14 Tomcats, and F-5 Tigers that make up most of Iran's frontline inventory are relics of another era. The Su-35 would represent a quantum leap, advanced radar, high maneuverability, long-range missiles, and an air-to-air capability that Iran's Air Force has never possessed in its history. The convergence of that delivery with the current crisis adds another layer of urgency to what is already a deeply complex situation. So where does this leave us? What does the full picture actually look like as of this moment? It looks like this. The United States has deployed one of its most powerful carrier strike groups to within 500 miles of Iran's southern coast. F-35A fighters specifically trained for air defense suppression missions, the exact kind of mission that would be required to open a path for strikes into Iran, are being moved into position in increasing numbers across Europe and toward the Middle East. Search and rescue aircraft are pre-positioned for the recovery of potentially downed aircrew. THAAD and Patriot batteries are deployed to protect U.S. installations from Iranian missile retaliation. The full weight of American air power in the region is the heaviest it has been since the immediate aftermath of September 11th. Iran, in response, has inducted 1,000 new sea-capable, strike-capable, electronically sophisticated, unmanned systems into its military. It has a drone carrier actively patrolling in the Gulf. Its IRGC has conducted live fire exercises in the world's most critical energy shipping lane. Its submarines are operating in waters where they have done so before and where they are extremely difficult to track. It has fired a drone at an American carrier, testing both U.S. reflexes and its own operational capability in real conditions against real defenses. It has threatened to seize American commercial shipping. And its commanders have publicly stated that they have learned the lessons of the 12-Day War, and that all of the capabilities they did not use in that conflict, all of the naval and short-range weapons specifically designed to target American warships, remain intact, ready, and untested. Let us also be honest about what a conflict here would mean for the entire world, not just for the U.S. and Iran. A closure of the Strait of Hormuz, even a partial or temporary one, would send shockwaves through the global economy that would be felt in every country on Earth. Energy markets would detonate overnight. Oil prices would spike to levels that would dwarf anything seen in decades. Shipping insurance premiums would become prohibitive for many operators, effectively shutting down commercial traffic through the Gulf, even if the military conflict was geographically limited. The economies of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, which depend entirely on that strait for their energy exports, would be thrown into crisis. Global supply chains, already fragile after years of disruption, would face another shattering blow. And the political fallout would be immeasurable. Saudi Arabia has already said it will not allow the U.S. to use its airspace or territory for any military operation against Iran. That significantly complicates American operational planning, because Saudi airspace is geographically central to any approach into Iran from the west or southwest. The Gulf states are walking a razor's edge between their security partnership with the United States and their need to survive in a neighborhood where Iran will still exist no matter what happens in any military confrontation. Nobody in the region wants to be left holding the consequences of a war that the Americans start and then walk away from. The diplomatic situation exists, technically. American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi were scheduled to meet in Istanbul on February 14, 2026. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed after the drone intercept on February 3rd that those talks were still on. She said that President Trump remains committed to pursuing diplomacy first, but that he has a range of options on the table as commander-in-chief, and that it takes two to tango. Trump himself said he was hopeful that something could be worked out, but warned that bad things would happen if it was not. The three American demands for any deal are explicit. Iran must permanently cease uranium enrichment, limit its ballistic missile stockpile, and end its support for proxy forces like the Houthis, Hezbollah, and other groups across the region. Iran has shown no indication that it is prepared to accept any of those three conditions. Tehran's own position is that it will only negotiate from a position of dignity and without what it describes as coercion, which is effectively a demand that the United States reduce its military presence in the region before talks can be productive. Washington will not do that. It is a diplomatic standoff layered beneath a military standoff with no obvious exit ramp visible from either side. And here is the final, most important thing to understand. The people around the world who study this for a living, the analysts at the International Crisis Group, the researchers at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the intelligence officers whose job it is to predict what comes next, are not dismissing the situation as theater. Ali Vaez, the Iran project director for the International Crisis Group, put it as plainly as anyone has. He said the threat of a massive Iranian retaliation should be taken seriously. He said Iran is basically fighting for its life right now. It is in survival mode. And a regime in survival mode can act in a reckless way. That is an expert who has spent decades studying this country, saying in public that the risk of catastrophic miscalculation is real. History is full of moments that seemed manageable right up until they were not. Moments where two forces were probing each other, testing each other, each one convinced that the other would blink first, right up until the moment when someone did not blink and the world changed overnight. The Strait of Hormuz is 2 miles wide. American warships are in it right now. Iranian submarines are underneath it right now. 1,000 new Iranian drones are pointed at those ships right now. And on the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, F-35s are fueled, armed, and ready to go. Whether the diplomats in Istanbul can find a way out of this before the weapons do the talking, that is the question that the entire world is waiting to have answered. And the answer, right now, is genuinely unknown. What is known is that the weapons are real, the stakes are real, the deployments are real, and the next few weeks could determine whether the Persian Gulf becomes the site of the most significant naval confrontation since World War II, or whether cooler heads find a way to pull both sides back from the edge of something that neither side, and no one watching, should actually want to see happen. Stay informed, stay engaged, because this story is not over, not by a long way.